Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today I have the Natasha Denona Pastel Palette to swatch for you. I do have some looks coming up, but I'm just going to show swatches in this video. So this palette has 15 shades. 8 of them are matte and 7 are shimmers. Of the 8 matte shadows, 4 of them are creamy powder shadows and the other 4 are regular powder shadows. And of the shimmer shadows, 4 of them have a mixture of small shimmer particles and large sparkles, and the other 3 are just all fine shimmer. This is a magnetic palette, so there are holes on the back of this. You can use like a toothpick or something to push the shadows out if you want to rearrange them, or if you have other Natasha Denona palettes and you want to kind of combine the shades and customize the palette, you can do that. So I don't know if you can see it all that well, but the shadows that are creamy powders have a little bit of a rougher looking texture here. So those are Tulle, Bora, Bubble, and Zest. They are a little bit more sheer than the powder mattes. They take longer to apply, and they blend out pretty easily compared to the powder mattes. I think they blend out easier. And most of them sit nicely on the skin without looking dry, with the exception of Zest. Zest does look slightly dry on the lid. I do also want to mention that some of the shades are slightly deceiving in the pan and don't quite look on the lid the way they look in the palette. Bora it looks like a darker purple in the palette, but actually once it's on the lid it's a lot more sheer and lighter. It comes off more as a pinky orchid shade once it's on the lid, and that's even after I've built it up. And I can get Bubble to look the way it looks in the pan, but it does require lots and lots of building. It is probably the sheerest shade in the palette. What else? Zest is, it looks like a lime green in the palette. It comes off more yellow, much more yellow on the skin. At least that's the way that it appears to me. And Duet it looks pink. It has a blue shift, and the blue shift is very, very strong. Once it's on the lid, it shows up a lot more than that pinky base color does. So here is the box that it came in. Let's see, you've got all the ingredients there, and it mentions that it is not tested on animals, paraben-free, alcohol-free, preservative-free, mineral oil-free, has no UV filters, no nanomaterials. And you've got the quantity there. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like I never really know which shadows are which type of formula until I get into using the palette. Would be kind of nice if it was listed on the back of the palette or on the packaging, just to kind of give you a heads up before purchasing it. Yeah, I don't see that anywhere here. The first shade is Tulle. It's a creamy powder and it's a matte medium pink with warm undertones. This one has a very slight sheen to it compared to all the other mattes. It has very, very fine shimmer in it. You almost can't see the shimmer, but the overall effect is just a very slight glow once it's on the skin. This next one is called Illusion, and it has a clear base with a pinky red shift to it. It's all small particles, smooth finish. It reminds me of another shadow that I have from Terra Moons called Red Giant. Both have kind of a red shift to them. This one is more pink than red. It's lighter, slightly more sheer, and slightly less of a dampened way that it reflects light. It's not super shiny. This next one is called Mint Frost, and it is a mixture of fine shimmer and large sparkles. It requires some building. Here, the way that I'm swatching it, it looks like it's coming off pretty heavily pigmented. It has good pigmentation. It's just kind of a little bit of a thicker formula. It needs some finesse. It needs some like building and layering, but it does adhere well and it does layer well. And the fallout is actually pretty minimal for being a sparkly shimmer. This next one is called Bora, and it's a creamy powder. It is pretty sheer, as you can see here, compared to the others. It also requires lots of building, more building than all of the other formulas, than the regular powder mattes and the shimmers. And it does look lighter on the skin compared to in the pan. This one sits on the lid really nicely. It's good if you have mature lids, textured lids. It doesn't emphasize that, and it doesn't look patchy. It blends out super nicely. Just requires more time, more patience. So it's not something I would recommend going into if you're in a rush, but it is a nice formula. This next one is called Dainty, and it's another one that is a mixture of fine shimmer and large sparkles. This one looks a little bit more purple, a little bit deeper in the pan than it goes on the skin. It's much more reflective and lighter, more frosty once it's applied to the skin. And the golden shimmer in it kind of takes away a little bit from that pink tone that you see in the pan. So it ends up looking like a light pinky gold frost once it's on. Also doesn't have super high amount of fallout. It's kind of just a regular amount of fallout. And here's everything up close from this first top row. So we're in the second row now, and this first shade is called Brisk. This is a regular powder matte shadow. These powder mattes are a little bit more dry. They do need some help to be applied evenly to the lid, so I've found these work much better over a primer than just over bare lids. They apply more evenly with more pigment. They last longer. If I apply them just to bare lids, then I will get some balding in some areas. It won't adhere very well. But the color payoff is still very good, and once I do get them applied, they pretty much stay where I put them. This next one's called Adriatic, and it is pretty similar to Mint Frost when you look at them in the pan. Also, if you look at swatches side by side, but this one has all fine shimmer. It does not have any large sparkles in it, and it's a slightly brighter green than Mint Frost. And at certain angles, you can't see it here, but it does have a very slight golden sheen to it that Mint Frost doesn't. So it's a little bit brighter and a little bit warmer overall. This next one is called Starlet, and this is a, how would I say, like an orangey coral shade with lots of golden sparkles in it. And this one is kind of out of place. I've heard other people say that it's kind of doesn't really belong in a pastel palette. I don't really care. I really like the shade. I think it's really pretty, and I'm glad they included it. This one has more sparkle fallout than the other two sparkly shimmers I mentioned earlier. If I apply it with my finger, if I apply it just with a brush, then the fallout is not too bad. This next one is Bellini, and this is another powder matte. It behaves the same way as Brisk. Color payoff is pretty good here. This type of shade is something I kind of hesitate with a lot of palettes. When I see these types of shades in palettes, very frequently they don't show up well on my skin, or they end up being pretty sheer. This one is pretty bright, and it does show up well. And the last one in the row is Bubble. This is another creamy powder. This is probably the sheerest shade in the palette, and it requires many layers of building. You'll see here that I fast forwarded. I think I swatched like 5 or 6 or 7 times to get this to be about the same opacity as all the other stuff in this row. It is a kind of a unique color of blue. It's like a periwinkle, a little bit more purple. It is similar to the other light blue in the palette called Airy, but that one is a powder, this one's a cream, and this one is cooler toned. I do like how this corner of shades in this palette with Bubble, Bora, and Dainty, all of these kind of play very nicely together. And here's this row close up. So for the last row, we're starting off with, let me say this, Limoncello. Limoncello, that's a very light yellow with larger blue sparkles. It's kind of sheer, and depending on what I apply it over, it will look more yellow or more blue. The blue sparkles they kind of fade and don't show up well if I just apply it over another light, warm shade like Bellini or I don't know. Yeah, one of those like Zest also. If I apply it over something like Bubble or Airy, those blue sparkles will show up a little bit more. This next one is called Duet, and in the pan, it's a light pink with a blue sheen. This one has all small particles, no large sparkles in it. And it's pretty sheer. That blue sheen, it is probably stronger than the base color, I would say, and it's sheer enough and light enough that I can actually use this on the brow bone. The next one is called Airy, and this one is a powder matte, a light blue. It is slightly warmer than Bubble, and it applies just the same way as the other powder matte shadows that I've talked about. This next one is called Zest, and this is the last creamy powder in the palette. In the pan, it looks like a very bright lime green. I think on the skin, to me, this looks a lot more yellow once it's on the skin, and also depending on what I pair it with, what I put it next to, can make it look different. If you are looking for a lime green, this one, it just, to me, really doesn't look like a lime green. It's pretty on its own. It's definitely a useful and pretty color, but it's kind of a deceiving color too. And this is, of all of the creamy powder shadows, probably the one that looks the most dry. It's a little bit strange the way that it looks on the skin. And this last one is Feather. This is another powder matte. This one looks pretty pink in the pan. I think it looks more purple once it's on the skin. And it might be useful to note that Feather and Bora, once they're on the eye together, are not that much different in depth, which is kind of surprising considering how deep Bora does look once, in the pan. So here's the last row of swatches close up. This is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I do have some tutorials coming up. I took photos of all these looks, but I haven't filmed them yet. If there's any specific one that you're interested in, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.